Greetings to all. I wanted to do something a little bit different this time and take a look at a cherished computer game from my childhood. With the new Warcraft movie opening in theaters, I felt the time was nigh for me to share my own fond memories of the Warcraft franchise. Before we get too far though, there's one thing I have to get off my chest and put out there right here at the beginning, just so everybody understands. I have never played World of Warcraft.
Shame!
I know.
Shame!
I know. I know.
Shame!
I know. How dare I call myself a Warcraft fan?
Shame!
Seriously though, flashing back to just before World of Warcraft came out, when I was still a teenager, I was fully enveloped in the hype for World of Warcraft at the time. I had every intention of joining the masses online for some MMO adventure in the World of Warcraft. I'd already decided which kind of character I was going to create and whether I would choose Alliance or Horde, etc., etc. But to make a long story short,
Too late.
fate wasn't on my side, I wasn't working at the time, my parents didn't want to pay the monthly charge for the game, obviously to their cards, so yeah. When the time came that I could pay for WoW myself, there were simply other things I was more interested in at the time. And since then, sure, I've had the chance to play it, but I've dabbled a little bit in MMOs in the past, but I've never really gotten that much into them. I think I'm just more of a single-player game experience kind of guy. So, call me old-fashioned, but if I'm gonna play a role-playing game with a whole group of people, this is still gonna be my game of choice. So, yeah. There you have it. Anyways, moving on. In spite of the Warcraft franchise moving beyond me, I will always cherish fond memories of playing the RTS series of games. For those who don't speak gamer lingo, RTS stands for Real-Time Strategy. I've actually met millennials who didn't know Warcraft was a strategy game first. Anyways, specifically today, I wanted to talk about this game. Warcraft II: Tides of Darkness. I must have been right around 8 years old or so when this game came out, and it has been so influential to me as a gamer and as a lover of the fantasy genre. This was well before my Dungeons & Dragons forays, and so I'd only barely started to dip my toes into the world of Tolkien even. So a lot of my first experiences with fantasy genre conventions and tropes stem directly from Warcraft II. I used to play the hell out of this, and sitting down to play it again while working on this video ignited a flood of nostalgic memories. Released by Blizzard Entertainment in 1995 for MS-DOS, Warcraft II built upon its predecessor, Warcraft: Orcs and Humans. While Warcraft: Orcs and Humans isn't responsible for the genesis of the RTS genre, it certainly lifted it to new heights, to be sure. Truly rivaled at the time only by Westwood's Dune and Command & Conquer RTS games. Unless I'm mistaken though, it was Blizzard's game that brought the genre into a fantasy medieval setting. Its influence is easy to spot in the genre, from Blizzard's own StarCraft to Microsoft's Age of Empires series, and many more too. Warcraft II picks up after the story of the first game, the first war in which an invading Orcish horde battled the human forces in the kingdom of Azeroth. Defeated, the humans fled across the sea to the allied kingdom of Lordaeron. This sets the scene for the Second War, heralded by a large fleet of orcs, prepared to conquer the humans and their new elven and dwarven allies. Like the first Warcraft, the game is split between two campaigns, orcs or humans. And within both, there is plenty of fun to be had, but you could also play a variety of individual customizable scenarios as well, and could even make your own, with a relatively simple-to-use map editor included within the game, with which I used to spend countless hours playing around with. Multiplayer gameplay was also available on a local area network, something that was made vastly easier with an updated release in 1999, allowing players the use of Blizzard's BattleNet service. Being more of a single-player person, as I mentioned earlier, I never bothered to get that update, but for compatibility's sake, I probably should have. The actual gameplay of Warcraft II would seem more than familiar to seasoned RTS gamers today, but back then, to call Warcraft II innovative might have been an understatement. The game gives you a set area to explore, varying in size, where the player acts as the leader of either the human or orc forces, and takes control of a variety of units on both sides, ranging from lowly peasants and peons, to melee and ranged attackers, to more powerful spellcasters. The variety here impresses me to this day. Not to mention the fact that each unit has individual lines of dialogue which change the more you bother them.
Leave me alone.
Are you still touching me?
Nothing new by today's standards, but at the time I remember not really experiencing anything like that in a game before, and I used to get a good chuckle out of it, still do.
Don't anger me. I warned you. Ew, that tickles. Bombs are great. Kaboom! Say hello to my little friend.
Even elder races get tired of waiting.
When my work is finished, I'm coming back for you. He did it. Oh, he did it.
I can still remember how amused I was by it. In most missions, the player begins with very little, and must begin gathering resources by mining gold and gathering lumber. From there, they can build up their forces with a tree of upgradable building choices, from which the player can then create additional units to protect their
The
town,
town is under attack.
up to a maximum amount supported by farms. As the campaign progresses, more and more units become available,
Do you need it as you wish?
which I remember for me made gaining access to new units very rewarding. And speaking of new units, joining the land-based units of Warcraft I,
Yes, my lord.
for the first time are the new air-based and sea-based units.
Yes, Captain?
Adding to the gold and lumber resources is the oil resource, which is required in order to build up your navy, comprised of faster vessels, slower but more powerful vessels, ships to transport land troops across the sea, and even submersibles. Yeah, they got submarines. When one's forces were strong enough, the fun of decimating your opponent's town or city was sweet indeed. And a lot of the time when playing Warcraft II, that would be the only objective you'd have to worry about. Although in the campaigns, you might have other, more specific objectives too, such as protecting and escorting unique units, known as heroes, building a specific or set number of a particular structure, or rescuing captured units, to name a few. Naturally, being a DOS game, Warcraft II is rather dated by today's standards, I will admit. In terms of gameplay, for example, you cannot queue up multiple units for construction. You wouldn't be able to do this, in a Blizzard RTS at least, until StarCraft. Similarly, you can't assign a grouping of units to a number hotkey on the keyboard, which I used to take advantage of in StarCraft and Warcraft III quite often. And playing this game again, I did indeed miss those features a lot. But in spite of this, if you allow yourself to, you can still have plenty of fun in Warcraft II, the game offering up plenty of strategic yumminess. In terms of graphics, for their time they were quite impressive, upgraded from the original Warcraft's VGA graphics to include higher resolution SVGA, with cinematics that are now ingrained in my memory. The soundtrack, whether you're listening to the built-in MIDI or the digital music tracks from the game CD, is awesome. Also, something needs to be said about the artwork. The book in particular captured my imagination as a kid. Both of the drawings contained therein, the maps, the lore, fantastic. It's really sad that games these days don't really do manuals anymore. Yeah, I know, it's apparently to save paper, but like with how many games are acquired these days via digital download, I will always strive to acquire hard copies. There's just something about having something tangible like this that I will always prefer. Anyways, I could spend a lot more time going into detail about the many features of Warcraft II and the nostalgic memories that come with it. But I simply wanted to take a minute to sing its praises and look back on all the fun times it's offered me. Not to mention the additional fun times I got when they released the expansion. An expansion set released later that year, Warcraft II Beyond the Dark Portal, offered up several new hours of gameplay and even some new surprises. Next to Sierra's King's Quest VI, I can safely say that Warcraft II was one of the most influential games that I played during my formative gaming years. If you're a fan of RTS games, or part of a newer generation of Warcraft fan who hasn't had the chance to play it yet, I highly recommend giving it a go. Sure, compared to Warcraft III, a masterpiece in its own right, or even by today's shiny standards, it may not look like much. But this game truly is a gem in computer gaming history, and should never be forgotten.
We did it.